This Strand Titan build just got an upgrade. Previously, Banner of War and Synthoceps were the go-to, and although they still are a reliable endgame option because despite the constant nerfs to Synthoceps, they still do wreck in most PvE content. But we actually now have a new build that's even stronger. It's essentially the same build as we had the past couple of seasons, but with a twist. Instead of using Synthoceps and slapping enemies with a 1-2 punch shotgun and melee while surrounded by adds, we'll instead be using the brand new Titan exotic arms, the Wishful Ignorance. And I have to admit, it's lethal AF. Sure, you can still go punch some adds in the face, but the primary part of this build is to cause some serious damage with the Flechette Storm, which is surprisingly really strong against champions and bosses. You can literally just melt anything in the game, especially if you're buffed out to the max with debuffs and taking advantage of artifact perks that further increase the melee's DPS. But this build is also great against general adds just to clear the room quickly. It honestly feels a lot better than the Synthoceps build, specifically because we no longer have to worry about being surrounded to buff our damage. Our new exotic will buff our damage by just using it. Not only will get our melee abilities back quicker to use frequently, but we'll still take advantage of Banner of War, which still is really good despite the nerfs it had. I mean, reducing the maximum time from 30 seconds down to 24 is not really a big deal, and decreasing the damage when combined with Synthoceps, and also nerfing Synthoceps by reducing the timer from 8 seconds to 5, well, I mean, that's kind of a big deal, but considering this build is designed to be used when surrounded by adds, you're still going to take advantage of all the buffs whether you decide to go with Synthoceps or Wishful. Honestly, the difference with pre-nerfed Strand Build versus nerfed Strand Build when using Synthoceps really doesn't feel bad. It still wrecked Legendary Campaign, but the new build that we have now in my opinion is just a lot stronger. But you know what else is good? Getting some good deals on cheaper games. Now are you looking for cheaper games? Then be sure to visit my sponsor CD Keys, where you can buy games up to 90% off and get your hands on some of the best deals of releases this year, like the Final Shape expansion, Elden Ring, and even get Xbox Game Pass cheaper too. As a regular customer myself, I find that CD Keys is the best go-to site when it comes to buying games cheaper and making the most out of my money. In fact, they're so good that they have an excellent rating with over 160,000 reviews on Trustpilot, and with just a few simple clicks, you could be playing your next favourite dream game. Go check them out, link below. Now firstly, before we start, if you guys like this build and you want to see more top builds like this for the Final Shape, then be sure to check out the full playlist down below, or you can find them over on my Mobalytics page. But one thing that really makes this build so good compared to the Synthoceps build is that we no longer need to be surrounded to buff our damage. By using the new exotic arms, the Wishful Ignorance, we will gain an additional melee charge, and our Frenzied Blade, as well as the Flechette Storm, will increase their damage with each strike. Pulses from your Banner of War return melee energy based on the number of allies healed. So basically what this means is when we slide and spam our melee ability, we will throw out a bunch of unraveling projectiles, and on every single hit we will get the Wish Dragon's Talons, which stacks up to 3 times, buffing its damage on each hit, and that damage increase on the third strike is a 50% increase. But if you are casually using the normal melee attack, you will get 100% damage increase, and if you are also using a 1-2 punch shotgun where you'd shoot then melee, shoot then melee, you'll be pulling off even more damage, and that's not mentioning any other buffs where we would have things like Shield Crush and debuffs applied to enemies. Now firstly, bear in mind that we have 4 melee charges, which is absolutely insane, and secondly, with Banner of War stacked up to ×4, that pulse is going to be pulsing so quick that we'll get those melee charges back a lot faster when we use them, which just means that the uptime on our abilities and the DPS that we can pull off overall will be much better. So we will still use the Banner of War Strand aspect, because what this does is give us a Banner of War that pulses with energy, that heals us and allies and increases our melee and sword damage. Then any final blows from us or allies nearby will extend that timer. I think because of the nerf where the timer was reduced from 30 seconds down to 24, I think that kind of put some people off from wanting to use this, but it really does make minimal difference. Throughout the Nightfall I played, I almost always had Banner of War active all the time, so that change to the timer really doesn't make an impactful difference in my opinion. With Synthoceps, you can still use those if you want to keep the original Banner of War build that we once had, but the timer of that surrounded buff when no longer surrounded will now only be 5 seconds, which to be honest doesn't seem like much of a difference, but it can be noticeable if your allies are killing the adds around you. But as long as you have adds around, then the build really doesn't have a major change, because the damage is still pretty solid. The only main thing I really like about using the Synthoceps is specifically for the super's damage increase, and using a normal melee attack with a 1-2 punch shotgun. So I do still like that build, and I will leave a dim link below if you do want to use that one, but I am preferring the new build a lot more now though. But essentially the way you'll use this build and how it works is you'd start off by getting Banner of War by either a melee or sword kill, and the reason for this is because you want to buff up that Banner of War, which is going to take a bit of time to do in order to get to that ×4. So you'll just go around, kill ads with your main weapon, but you'll generate the orbs as well, which you'll want to pick up to get Woven Mail, because Woven Mail will buff your melee's damage and also speed up its passive regeneration. So whenever you're going in for a damaging melee attack, which is what you'll do really anytime you want, but ideally when you have a tough enemy to kill, you really do want to make sure that you're picking up an orb just beforehand so that you're getting that increased damage to melt enemies as fast as possible. You're not always going to be perfect. Sometimes you might not have the ×4 Banner of War, or you might not have all 4 melee charges, or you might just not be able to quickly grab an orb and then use all 4 charges. But the main and only main thing with this build that you want to ensure that you're doing right is making sure that when you do attack an enemy with your melee, that you're hitting them one after another straight away, at least 3 times to get that max damage buff from the Exotics perk. As long as you're getting that at least, then you're really making good use of the build. Otherwise, you may as well just be surrounded and use Synthoceps. You'd honestly be better off with that build instead. Now with our aspects, you will want to make sure that you're using the Banner of War, but also the Flechette Storm, because what this does is allow you to slide and use your melee to basically fire projectiles, which does do a lot of damage when combined with the exotic, so it really does wreck everything, especially if you're maxed out on those 4 charges and have Banner of War stacked up to ×4 as well. I am using the grapple melee just because this is also a good source of damage, since you can grapple to an enemy and then melee them, and anything else that creates a tangle with this build is always welcome, because we will be using those tangles for additional benefits. The main benefit is the Thread of Fury fragment, where damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy. As a melee build, you do want to ensure you're getting as much melee energy as possible to refill all 4 charges, so that you can use it to melt mini bosses and champions, or just have a quick attack that clears a group of ads quickly. I am using the Thread of Warding as well, because by picking up an Orb of Power, we'll get Woven Mail for that damage resistance, but Woven Mail actually plays a much bigger part of this build for 2 reasons. The first is the next fragment, Thread of Transmutation, where you can create tangles while you have Woven Mail, just an extra source of getting tangles, but the main reason is for the artifact perk, Shield Crush, where while you have Woven Mail, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. That is a 20% faster melee recharge rate and a 25% damage increase for our melee, so it is a big difference, especially when you combine this with the Banner of War and the ×3 stack with the Wishful Exotic. So you can see how all that damage just gets thrown in to melt literally everything, assuming that you have all those buffs active. Your only main struggle with this build will be getting that Shield Crush perk to activate, because Banner of War won't be a problem, neither will the Exotic, but making sure that you have Woven Mail on top of that, and also potentially debuffing the enemy, is going to make this build a little harder to use if you want to put off the best damage when you go in for that attack. Our only source of getting Woven Mail is through an Orb of Power, so I strongly recommend running a Siphon mod for your main killing weapon. For me, that's a Solar Siphon with Sunshot, since it does a good job at ad clearing and getting those orbs. But the second way to get those orbs will be through the Heavy Handed mod to create them on melee final blows. So either way, you would really get that DPS benefit if you use the regular melee attack just before using all of them. Just make sure that you're using a 1-2 punch shotgun to maximize that damage output if you are using the normal attack and not the sliding one. For the last fragment that I didn't touch on was the Thread of Generation. This is just to give us extra grenade energy when taking damage, but you can use anything of your choice for that slot if you want to. For the artifact perks, you could also use the sword ones, since Banner of War affects swords, and the artifact perks are increasing sword damage and refunding ammo, so those perk choices could be a good option if you decide to use swords. One of my favourite swords I like to use is the Lament, but I mean everyone has their own preference, and there are a ton of good legendary swords to use in the game right now as well. In terms of mods and stats, you want to go with anything that is going to get your melee back faster, so any mods where picking up orbs grants melee energy is a good mod to go with for this build. And for the stats, you'd want to go with Resilience ideally first for that survivability, then Strength and Discipline. That would be your ideal triple 100 build, and to be honest, those are the only 3 stats you should really be going for when it comes to using any Titan build in PvE. Now this is probably one of the best Strand Titan builds in the game right now, if not the best Titan build overall for this season, for Destiny 2 Episode 1 Echoes. This build was a really fun build to use and make, and probably my favourite so far for the final shape, but as the weeks go on I will be coming up with some more amazing top tier builds, so be sure to keep an eye out here on the channel for more builds to come, and until then, keep grinding, stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next build. Peace out guys.